Well, here we have the wedding feast at Cana. It's used in various grades through the primary school, and it is connected especially with the receiving of the sacrament of the Holy Eucharist because of the connection between the changing of the water into wine and a connection you can see with the changing of the wine into the blood of Christ that happens much later, of course. So in this presentation, again, as usual, you've got the indicator at the top of the page of the key concepts, the core concepts that we're working with. And this is taken directly from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It says, the sign of water turned to wine at Cana prefigures the wedding feast in the Father's kingdom, where the faithful will drink the new wine that has become the blood of Christ. Of course, this is not something you say and read out to the children, but it's something you want them to come to an understanding of as they move through their grades, and perhaps especially when they are thinking about this in terms of their First Holy Communion. The materials that are needed is the diorama for the wedding at Cana. Now, the diorama actually that's provided will be in its usual box, and it includes the bride and the groom, and the other figures are taken from the gospel characters or other spaces. So for this presentation, I have gathered Mary and Jesus. Jesus is from, as he's presented in the gospel characters kit, because he's just preaching and talking. He hasn't got wounds in his hands. He's not holding the bread of the Last Supper. I've taken 1 or 2, 3 apostles from the scene of the Last Supper. And then there's a woman I've added here from the gospel characters kit as well. And then here we have another character who's taken from another kit. So this person is representing the steward who has to check the quality of the wine. The kit itself then has these 2 characters. It has a suitable diorama background that you can select. It has the 6 jars that I used in the diorama. And then lastly, you have a jug, a little jug that can contain water. You need a clear jug, so we provide a clear jug for what's about to be seen. So you also have in the kit some red fruit juice cordial that is needed for this work, as you will see. That's not showing here at the moment. Another handy thing to have is the map of Israel, because you might want to point to where Cana actually is, which we will include. And I just keep that. It could be already faced out towards the children, but I've just got it placed here. So here we go. It has a list of words to introduce to the children. The idea is to actually explain or describe and touch on these words before the presentation. It's not, strictly speaking, included in the presentation, but you actually do present it explicitly to the children. And these are the words to know. The first word is Cana. Cana is a town in Galilee. It's just here. And we've got, as you know, we have the magnets, and we can pop that right there. Cana is in the region of Galilee, quite close to the Sea of Galilee, and close to Nazareth, a little way from Nazareth, quite far away from Jerusalem. So that's where Cana is. And then you've got Capernaum, which is also mentioned, and Capernaum here is over here. And if I had my magnet map, I can add that in. Here it is. I've got it on the other map. And Capernaum is here. Those places are mentioned in the story. If I remember rightly, those places are named in the story. Then you have the word disciples. I'm sure you probably know what disciples are. They're followers. Jesus had disciples, followers, his followers. And there's a word you're going to hear today, and it's woman. And you might think when Jesus is talking to his mother, he's kind of what is he saying, calling her woman? That is a way of addressing an important woman, an important person who is a woman of great dignity. And in Jesus' time, that term was used as a sign of deference towards that person. So it's an important person of great dignity. So the other thing that's good for you to know is that the Jews had rites of purification. And in those rites, they washed their hands and their feet before they went to special events or special feasts. So that's the Jewish rites of purification, and that's why we have these jars. They were put there for that. Another thing you need to know that's mentioned is that 1 gallon. What is 1 gallon? Well, 1 gallon is about 4.5 litres. 20 gallons is about 80 litres. So you imagine how much water is going to be in each one of these jars if they were full-sized. Just watch out and listen for the words. The master of the feast, right? The master of the feast is the person who is like the head server, the head organizer for the feast. So the first thing you do is have the diorama set up. And the other thing that you need to do, speaking to the teachers here, or the catechists, is to place in 1 or 2 of the jars a little bit of your, it could be food colouring, but that can tend to stain a little bit. We're tending to recommend something like Ribena, a little bit of cordial, very strong, the darkest kind of colour you can find. We try to include some of that in the kit to get you started, but just a tiny little bit at the bottom. If you want to make sure that somehow that's not going to tip out, and you want to disguise its presence in there, down at the bottom, there are different solutions we're working on right now. You could stick very well a little piece of Velcro at the bottom, and that will absorb the cordial so that the jar could be turned upside down and nothing is in the jar. Or perhaps you could even consider a bit of cotton wool that's brown so that it doesn't even show that it's down there, and then you pop the cordial in a couple of the jars. So that's the preparation. The other thing you have to have is your little jug of water, and it needs to have clear water in it. So those are the things you prepare. This is the way I've set it up right now, and let's see if it works for us. So this is the presentation for today. Today we're going to learn about the very first miracle that Jesus performed, and it took place at a wedding. I wonder if you can discover the link with the gift that we receive in the Eucharist. We're going to light a candle. Here we have our candle, the Paschal candle that we have in the classroom. And we're going to light it because we're reading from the Bible. You wouldn't repeat this every time to the children, but it's good to remind them. When we're reading from the Bible, we light the candle, and also because it reminds us of the presence of Jesus in our lives. Let's see if this little thing works. There you go. And our reading is from the Gospel of St. John. If you have a Bible cabinet, it's really nice to be able to point to that. We haven't put it here today, but you can point to the Gospel of John, which is the 4th Gospel in green little books in the Bible cabinet. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana in Galilee. And the mother of Jesus was there. And Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with you and with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now, there were 6 stone jars, water jars, there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, let's make this one a servant. I didn't include the servants over there with the master of ceremonies, but it's okay. Jesus said to the servants, these kinds of, by the way, interrupting myself, but these kinds of things will happen, that you find you've had limited time, you've set the things up, you think you're ready, something's not quite right. Just keep going. And I'm going to leave this here in the film deliberately so that you can see how to deal with things calmly and respectfully, and the children will accept that. So we'll just pop back to that moment. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And then he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." So they took it. Let's pretend they're taking this, but what are they taking? And they took some of the water to the master of the feast. When the master of the feast tasted the water now become wine, and did not know where it came from, although the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom. And he said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine till now." This was the first of the signs that Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and his brothers and his disciples, and there they stayed for a few days. And here we have, this is where, remember? So this is Cana, where the feast happened, and not far from it, here is Capernaum, quite close to the Sea of Galilee. So that's where Jesus went to stay after the wedding feast. Now we'll snuff out the candle. And this is something you can ask the children to do and teach them how to use a snuffer so that they're very gentle and snuff out the candle themselves. So let's wonder about this a little bit. I wonder why Mary told the servants to obey Jesus, even though he told her that it was not yet his time. I wonder what this kind deed of Jesus shows about him. And here they might come up with different answers and thoughts. It might be because he was very generous. It might be because it was going to teach them something about his mission. A whole variety of thoughts can come forward. Or no thoughts at all. but you'll always encourage them to continue thinking about this as they are doing their choices, making their choices. And the last I wonder question here, I wonder how this miracle might be linked to the Eucharist. That's a big question to ponder over time. And another one that can be used, I wonder what Jesus meant when he said his time has not yet come. That's another big question to think about. And then it goes on in the booklet to suggest some things for pondering, choices that lead to pondering. The children can respond by actually using the diorama themselves to retell the story. They might use their student workbook or their journal to write things in, or even if they're making their first communion, for example, there's probably, I think there is a page there in the student workbook that addresses the wedding at Cana. They might engage in some simple craft activity, or some tracing or drawing or painting, or spending a little bit of time in the prayer space, reflecting on this. So there are some of the choices that the children can take.